Buckeyes Now on Sports Illustrated. I'm Brendan Gulick. Good morning and welcome to our preview of the Big Ten quarterfinals. Looking forward to talking with Tom Brew, who covers Purdue for Sports Illustrated as well. This is round 3 between two teams that have frankly played pretty good games against each other. But Purdue has found a way to come out on top in each of the last 2, and I know the Buckeyes haven't played their best basketball of late. So perhaps this is a game that has some Buckeye fans nervous as the quarterfinals are here and a potential berth in the semifinals against what would likely be Michigan, although we don't want to count out Maryland. Certainly looks like an awfully big game looming after this one. So let's talk a little bit about the Buckeyes and the Boilermakers. And why don't we start with Purdue, because they haven't yet had an opportunity to play in the Big Ten tournament. Are you more on the rest or rhythm side of things when it comes to playing early in the tournament or waiting till you get to the quarters?
Well, it's I always think these 4-5 matchups in every conference tournament are intriguing because of exactly that. You've got a team that had a chance, an opportunity to play the day before, get a feel for the arena, which I think is really critical this year, without being able to practice on the game floor and then get shots up and what is at Lucas Oil Stadium a very strange background, and you're playing basically on the one half of a football field with literally nothing behind you, for at least 100 feet or so before there are even stands, and so that does take getting used to. So I think I like the fact that Ohio State has had a chance to get a game under their belt there. And they were able to play early. Sometimes what gets to be a problem in these tournaments with the team playing the day before and the other one resting is sometimes we have to go from night game to day game and things like that where the turnaround is quick. But, I think Ohio State, they played early. Minnesota certainly, made them kind of sweat it out until the end. And, so everybody sort of played their 40 minutes, but I thought Chris used his bench well yesterday too, and I think those guys should have plenty of energy. And I think I would kind of favor Ohio State from the rest versus rust thing just a little bit. But Purdue has been used to this before. They have played with a double bye many times, and Matt Painter knows how to sort of deal with that and prepare for that. So I think he'll have them ready. And certainly the way the first 2 games have gone this year, it's bound to be entertaining basketball for sure.
And frankly, the way that this whole Big Ten tournament's gone so far, obviously we've talked about the competitive nature a lot throughout the course of the league. And obviously these 2 teams are right in the heart of that conversation. But the tournament itself, even a couple of the games that haven't been, great games, have been tight and very competitive. And frankly, maybe yesterday's game between Ohio State and Minnesota was shaping up to be the least competitive based on the way, the Buckeyes got off to a 13-0 start and had a chance to really put their foot on Minnesota's throat and followed that 13-0 run with 4 consecutive turnovers. So that kind of left a sour taste in your mouth if you're an Ohio State fan thinking, gee, is this going to happen again? Are the Buckeyes going to struggle to close a game again? They stretched the lead back to 14 points. I think it was 12 with under 2 minutes to go. And then all of a sudden the pressure ratcheted up big time, and Ohio State had a tough time closing that game yesterday, and it ended up being a really tight contest. I said yesterday that maybe I'm in the minority here. I think it might actually help Ohio State to have played a game where they really had to play the full 40 minutes and couldn't just coast to a win. When you win those kinds of games in tournaments, I think it does a lot for your confidence. I don't think it has anything to do with Ohio State not believing they could beat Minnesota despite losing to them earlier in the year. I realize Minnesota was down a couple guys yesterday, including Robbins, who really played well against the Buckeyes back in January. But I think there's something to be said for squeaking out a win in a tournament, because it puts you in that mindset of, every single possession is valuable, every minute is valuable, and you just can't ever let up. And I think Ohio State felt that, Tom. The last time these 2 teams played when Ivy hit a three with a couple seconds to go. I mean, that was the difference in the game, right? So the Buckeyes have plenty of reminders of why they've got to make sure they're locked in for a full 40, and I expect today's game to be pretty competitive.
Sure, and because I think anytime you go through what they went through yesterday, it's a great reminder for when it happens again. Like I would venture to guess that if by chance, Ohio State is up 8 or 10, with 3 or 4 minutes to go in this game today, that they lean back on that and realize, okay, we need to really finish this thing out. Every possession does matter. We can't just let that guy just fire up an open three because we're up 10. It has to matter. It's like you have to sort of have that desire when you're up 10 to get it to 13, not 7. When you're up 7, to get it to 9 and it's not 5. It has to be played that way in this league every night, and we've learned that in the last 3 months. I mean, there are no bad teams in this league, and even the guys at the bottom of this league, guys like Marcus Carr at Minnesota, the guys at Nebraska who can get hot. Penn State, Myron Jones, they can just get hot really fast for a minute, and knock down 3 threes in a minute, and all of a sudden that 12-point leads 3. Or that 12-point leads 5 if you've made a couple free throws or something. It can change on a dime, and everybody's got the potential. Outside of Indiana, everybody in this league makes shots. And I had to get that in. But it's just and Purdue's that way too. Now Purdue has been, Purdue has been a streaky shooting team themselves at times this year, but they're in the same boat too. When you get Sasha Stefanovic hot, or you get Jaden Ivey hot, or even lately Aaron Wheeler off the bench has come in and hit threes, you have the potential for a Purdue team to do the same type of thing, and certainly it can happen down the stretch of a game, but it also happens at any time during the game where these hard-fought, close games that are going back and forth, 1 possession, 2 possession games, you kind of get into that rhythm for 8, 10, 12 minutes, and all of a sudden somebody nails 4 threes in a minute and a half, and all of a sudden the game is turned completely. Then it's up to the other team to get it back, and we've seen a lot of that throughout the Big Ten all year too. And certainly Ohio State's, as from watching them so much, they're very capable of striking quickly like that too. But you just never know when that's going to come. But I think we'll certainly see runs on both sides on Friday and some streaky shooting on both sides.
Matthew chimes in. That's what happened yesterday. Ohio State almost gave it away, and I certainly think we've touched on that. It was super frustrating when you have a double-digit lead late in the game, and you're so close to thinking, okay, this is comfortable, and then that's what this time of year is all about, because a 12-point game can go to 3, like you said, so fast. All of a sudden, you sit there and you wonder what happened. It's a missed free throw here, it's a sloppy turnover there, and all of a sudden points rack up really quickly. So if you have a comment, you're watching live along with us, feel free to chime in. We'd love to interact with you as well. Look, Tom, you had brought up the point that this is a familiar situation for Purdue, because Matt Painter's teams have pretty typically had double byes regularly since the tournament went to this format. But this is as young a team as there is anywhere in the country. I saw on KenPom, it's like out of the 347 teams that play college basketball, the average experience time on Purdue is barely over 1 year. They're one of the least experienced teams in Division I. Now, you get to this time of year, you've played 20 some odd games. You'd like to think, quote unquote, you're not a freshman anymore. But still, tournament time ratchets a different level of intensity and pressure that maybe some of the younger players haven't quite felt yet. And I'm interested to see how guys like Ivy and Edey, who obviously had great years, they were all Big Ten freshman teamers for a reason. I'm interested to see how they play when they're in a tournament now. And I think that there is something to be said for Ohio State's experience, even though Matt Painter has certainly got this team ready to go. You can coach as well as you want to coach, but guys have to go out and execute plays. And I'm interested to see if Ivy and Edey and other freshmen are really ready for that moment.
Well, it's always the unknown. You don't know when you flip the calendar over into the postseason, you don't know how different teams are going to play. You try to get a gauge for that sometimes, in watching games that lead up to it in this tournament, what some of the other teams have done. And I was sort of struck yesterday in that, in the 6 games so far, everybody sort of has played the way they played all year, at least in watching it. It's Ohio State probably had the most dominant performance, for 35-ish minutes of anybody so far, but they were the highest seed team too, and they should have. And, Rutgers looked really good for stretches against Indiana, but disappeared like they've kind of done all year. Wisconsin, very hard to figure out, but got some big senior plays at the end last night. You see that, so you try to project forward as to what that might mean for other teams. And for Purdue, one of the things that Matt Painter told me last week that I think has kind of gotten lost in this is that their freshmen have been very good, but they also have a very good junior class of guys who have that experience, who have really carried this team at long stretches too. I mean, obviously Trayveon Williams, first team all the Big Ten selection on one of the polls, second team with the other. He's a junior, great player, great inside player, has been through all this, will be fine. Sasha Stefanovic is, he's beyond his COVID stuff now, and he's really starting to get in a role. He's a junior. He's a great shot maker, but people often forget it's just how good of a defensive player he is from a standpoint of just always knowing where to be and always being in the right spot and having hands on balls. Aaron Wheeler, like I mentioned earlier, is kind of the forgotten guy in this team a little bit, but he's been really good the last 2 or 3 weeks coming off the bench, hitting shots, getting big rebounds. And Ohio State fans will remember, of course, that it was Jaden Ivey who hit the shot to win that game in Columbus, but it was Aaron Wheeler who had 2 offensive rebounds in the last 3 minutes of that game. That was probably just as important. So that junior class has really played a key role in this as well. And I think that helps. And I think all of them just sort of going through this, I don't think the stage is going to be too big for Purdue at all. I really don't. I mean, I feel like this team has really grown into themselves very well this year. And having, they played Indiana last Saturday, so they actually had a chance, on Sunday and Monday to kind of catch their breath a little bit. They all stayed away on Sunday completely. They just had a little light workout on Monday, went through some things pretty hard Tuesday and Wednesday, but they've rested and they're ready to go. And Matt, of course, does a tremendous job of game prep and scouting reports and such. So I think they're dialed in pretty well on Ohio State. But I think they also know that being a 4 seed or a 5 seed, they know it doesn't matter. I mean, these two teams are equals, and I think they both know that going in. And as much as the Ohio State guys last night were talking about really wanting that other shot at Purdue kind of carries this disrespect flag around too. That everybody keeps saying it's like Ohio State's better. Yeah, sure, Purdue beat them twice, but Ohio State's better. And I think Purdue does definitely want to go out there on Friday today and kind of make that statement again that hey, we are the 4th seed in this league for a reason. We beat Ohio State twice for a reason. But they need to prove it again, and that's college basketball. It's like just because Purdue won the first 2 does not mean they get an advantage on the scoreboard when this game starts. It's 0-0, and both teams are hungry, and I'm really looking forward to kind of watching how it all plays out.
You're spot on, I would think, with that disrespect flag that you referenced, because for being the 4 seed in the conference tournament and recognizing the 3 seeds above them are all really highly nationally ranked teams, Michigan, Illinois, and Iowa. For Ohio State to be a top 10 team, and for Purdue, over the last couple of weeks, they kind of struggled to crack the top 20. But they've beaten Ohio State twice, and they had a better record, in Big Ten play without a tiebreaker to pick up the 4 seed. So I can certainly understand why they might feel that way. But it comes down to today's game and whether or not they can do it a third time, because sometimes that's all you need to prove.
Right. The naysayers with Purdue will say this, that they had the benefit of a quote unquote weaker Big Ten schedule. This year it's hard to, it almost sounds silly saying it, but they only had to play Michigan once and they lost. They only had to play Iowa once and they lost. They only had to play Illinois once and they lost. So the three teams ahead of them in the seedings in the Big Ten tournament, Purdue's 0-3 against them. And quite frankly, none of the games were really even close. I mean, it's they were beaten soundly by all three of those teams. So it's easy to question. When you look at the top four teams in the Big Ten, Purdue's clearly the fourth. Now the question is, when you look at 4 and 5, who really is the better team there? And obviously, Purdue. What I've been when going back and rewatching the Purdue Ohio State games, what I've been really impressed with in those games was how well Purdue played defensively. They really made Ohio State work to score from beginning to end, in all of those games, and especially down the stretch in those games, they really made it tough. For Ohio State to get good looks and to get, they kept them away from going on those runs that we talked about earlier. So I think Purdue has a pretty good feel for what Ohio State likes to do. They have a pretty good feel, more importantly, I think, for what Ohio State likes to do specifically against Purdue, because it makes it different, especially now with Zach Edey, the 7'4" Purdue freshman who's playing. He sort of changes how Purdue plays defensively a little bit, where they will now try to funnel some guys into the middle so that he can be more of a shot blocker. He's got surprisingly good feet in the lane. He's still awkward on those on the screen rolls way up high, but he is becoming a better defensive player, and they can do things differently. And Purdue. They're a man-to-man team, but they do a lot of different things inside of that defense, really based on matchups. And certainly they have frustrated Ohio State pretty well in these first two matchups when it comes to that. And this is the chess match today. Is what does Chris Holtmann have on his plate to kind of attack that Purdue defense a little differently, and try to get some points a little bit easier, because they've certainly been hard to come by in these first two games so far.
I don't want to get too far away from this matchup, and we'll wrap up here quickly. But I really think Illinois might be a slightly more favored team to win this tournament than Michigan. Certainly has something to do with the curb stomping they gave Michigan without Ayo Dosunmu on the floor just a couple weeks ago. Iowa is certainly capable of winning the conference title. That's certainly not to say that Michigan can't either. I said after the Ohio State-Michigan game that I thought Michigan was absolutely good enough to win the national championship. I feel that way about Illinois. Iowa's gotten better defensively lately, but they are certainly a better offensive team than they are on the defensive end. And in games where they've lost, it's been because of the defensive end for the most part. Purdue has the talent and the size and the physicality to make a deep run in this tournament. Obviously, the Buckeyes have beaten Illinois already. They've beaten Iowa. They played a great game against Michigan, came down to a couple possessions. But, Ohio State, I think, is very capable of winning this tournament. I'm not so sure Rutgers or Wisconsin or Maryland will win the tournament. But I think it's fun when you've got quarterfinal matchups where legitimately 5 teams – I think are very capable of winning the whole thing. I guess Wisconsin, it's possible, but I would struggle to see them beating Illinois. I've got that one. Yeah.
I think there's a huge difference after Ohio State. And it's the Wisconsin team has really disappointed me this year. I mean, with all those seniors, I really thought they'd be better. And they finished 10-10 in the Big Ten. I know the league's tough, but I mean, there were a lot of games where they were no shows, and I'm kind of, to be honest, I was told someone last night I'm kind of tired of watching that team. It's just they got a bunch of 23 and 24-year-old guys that and we've watched them for 5 years now, and they've been disappointing this year, because I really thought they were my preseason. They were number one in my first Big Ten power rankings. I had that much hope for them, but they haven't been there. And Rutgers, I think, is just too inconsistent. They can be scary at times. They will certainly give Illinois a handful tonight, but you just don't know. I mean, Rutgers this year has just not played well for 40 minutes, most nights. And Maryland, I think, is going to be in over their heads today with Michigan a little bit. But Maryland, they looked good against Michigan State yesterday. They really did, and that surprised me. I thought Michigan State was this team that was going to sort of make a little run, a surprising run here, and Maryland just pounded them got off to a slow start, but they outscored them by 25 the last 30 minutes of the game, and and then it was good. So I think when we come down to what's ahead of us here, I mean I think that we'll get good games today, but I think for sure, no question, Purdue Ohio State to me is the one that's the toss up. I mean I think the other three I'll go with those higher seeds, but Purdue Ohio State to me is a complete toss up.
It's going to be a lot of fun. In particular, we kind of wrap up just final thoughts on this game. I am looking to see how quickly Ohio State can get into a rhythm with their jump shots. It feels to me like the last couple of weeks during that losing streak, and then honestly, even yesterday, the Buckeyes didn't hit a basket outside the paint for the first 15 minutes of the game. It wasn't until E.J. Liddell hit a three with like 4:40 left in the first half that they scored from the field outside the key. Boy, I just don't think that's going to be a good recipe against Trayveon Williams and Zach Edey today. I think Justin Arns has to get going. He's been surrounded at the three-point line so often and so quickly. He really hasn't even gotten up the volume of shots, let alone making baskets from behind the three-point line. I really think Ohio State's got to get him involved early. It would certainly help if Dwayne Washington has an efficient day. He played pretty well yesterday. I think Justice Suing is coming off of a really good game. But Chris Holtmann told us earlier this week that he had a procedure between the Illinois game that closed the season last Saturday and when he spoke with us on Wednesday that basically kept Justice off the practice floor for the whole week. He did some light work on Wednesday, but that was it. So without knowing much more about what that procedure was, Justice was asked about it post-game yesterday and didn't really want to talk about it. I think it's fair to wonder, how long can he go? The prospect of maybe playing several days in a row, will that be challenging for him? I think that's a fair thing to wonder, but obviously the Buckeyes need him to play well. C.J. Walker told Coach Holtmann he wants to come off the bench in the postseason. Coach Holtmann obliged, and it certainly seemed to work yesterday with the 13-0 run at the beginning of the game. But I really think the Buckeyes have to get into a good rhythm offensively, and if they get stuck in a half-court offense trying to drive to the basket repeatedly against the really tough post players that Purdue's got, I think it could be a tough day. So the biggest thing, Tom, that I'm watching for is whether or not Ohio State can get into a rhythm in their mid-range or in their long-range game offensively.
I agree. I think Dwayne Washington, for me, is the guy in this game. But I think if he gets the hot hand early and makes some threes, that he can be that difference maker. I think part of it, when comparing yesterday to today, is that I think Ohio State wanted to attack the basket yesterday against Minnesota without Robbins in there. And I think they were intentionally, trying to get to the hoop a little bit more in that game than maybe they might try today. But they run a pretty good inside offense. E.J. Liddell can stretch the floor against those big guys at Purdue, which makes it a little bit different too. And so I think we're talking two different game plans here a little bit. So I think Ohio State, you've seen them during the stretch. They just haven't really shot as well from the perimeter lately anyway. But we all know that they've got a lot of good perimeter shooters on this team. So I think it's just a question of finding their way. Like to me, the number I'm looking at today is that if Dwayne Washington makes more threes than Sasha Stefanovic, Ohio State wins. If Stefanovic makes more threes than Washington, then Purdue wins. I think it's going to be really a matter of that. I think it will wind up being a 1 or 2 possession game, and it's to me, it's which one of those guys kind of hits a big three down the stretch to make the difference.
Well, we'll certainly keep our eye on that. Before we wrap up, since Matthew chimed in one more time, what are we going to do with Williams? He almost had a triple-double last game, got to neutralize him. I totally agree. He is, he's the best player Purdue's got, and he's their most consistent threat. In guarding him, I think you have to throw multiple bodies at him, and one of those guys has to be Zed Key. And Zed, I don't think, played particularly well yesterday. This is a really big game because if Kyle Young or if E.J. Liddell gets in any sort of foul trouble, Musa Jallo came in yesterday to help spare some of those minutes when Young picked up a couple of fouls. If Zed Key can play effectively today, even if it's not, a great stat sheet kind of game, but just being another big body and making life tough on Williams, I think the Buckeyes have to go with strength in numbers and trying to just make life tough on Williams. He's going to get his. He's one of the best players in the Big Ten, and frankly, he's going to be at the top of the scouting report. I realize Ivy can shoot it. I know Stefanovic is a really good three-point shooter. You can't ignore a 7'4" guy in the paint, but I think the scouting report for Ohio State, when it comes to Purdue, it starts with Trayveon Williams, and the Buckeyes have to find a way to make life really difficult on him today, for sure.
Absolutely. The one thing that people forget most about Trayveon Williams is how good of a passer he is.
Yep.
The teams that have been successful against him this year are the teams that double occasionally, double from different directions, try to give him a new look each time, and try to confuse him where sometimes he thinks maybe he can go to the basket and really that's not the right call. Or sometimes he'll pass out of something where maybe he's got a chance. You have to try to keep him confused. And we all know, Chris is a very good defensive coach. I mean, I think we'll see a lot of that. I think they will come at him early, especially from different directions, try to make him uncomfortable, try to make other people beat them early. But the one thing that's interesting, Brendan, is down the stretch, these last couple of games, Purdue has gone with Zach Edey down the stretch and not Trayveon. And the kid's delivered. He has been getting great low post position. And when you're 7'4", the team,
a little easier to do.
Exactly. And, Ohio State, they, for as good as they are not tall.
Right.
They're going to have to guard him, with 6'8", 6'9" guys, giving up 6-7 inches. So that means they got to get him off the block, and they need to limit the easy baskets, down low with Purdue's big guys for sure.
Tom Brew covers Purdue at Boilermakers Country, si.com/college/Purdue. You can read all of his stuff there as he covers Boilermakers here in the Big Ten tournament. He's also doing some work covering that other team that Purdue fans don't typically follow quite as closely in Bloomington. And you can follow all of our stuff, BuckeyesNow.com. We're here on our YouTube channel as well. Social media outlets, all are Buckeyes Now on SI. For Tom Brew, I'm Brendan Gulick. We'll see you live from Lucas Oil Stadium coming up here in just a few hours. The Buckeyes and the Boilermakers, Big Ten quarterfinals. It's a Friday afternoon matinee game, 2 o'clock on Big Ten Network. We'll see you a little bit later.